Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. Today I want to talk about right livelihood, and I've talked about this before, but not in as much detail. Right livelihood is not a concept from our tradition, it's from the mainstream Buddhist tradition. It was a teaching that the Shakyamuni Buddha gave, and about, like, what should we do? Most of us have to earn money to live, and how can we make decisions about what to do? Now, this is a kind of a question that I get very, very often when people want some kind of personal advice, and there's lots of different levels in which people ask the question, what should I do? And for a living, in other words. Sometimes they're asking for direction. Other times, unfortunately, they're asking, what would be the absolute greatest thing for me to do? The one thing I was brought here and born here to do. I mean, that is a kind of an approach to the question, what should I do, that leads to suffering, for sure. And it's part of our Titan culture that, you know, we were brought up to think everyone is great somehow. I mean, we all are great, but not in that ordinary sense. In my book, there is no mandate that we all have to be great at something, or we all came with our one special gift, and if we don't find it, our life is a failure. These are all pressures that get put on us by our society that is so focused on rising above everyone else in some way or another, really. The two kinds of answers that I like to this question are sort of, what are some directions that would suit your skills and the things that you want to do? There's no problem with just doing something you like. That's a fine way to approach this question. You don't have to find that one perfect thing. You can just do something you like. But then there are some specific rules about when we are trying to live in accordance with our own values and our own inner sense of value, then how do we make decisions about what to do? So that's what this teaching is really about. And so these are general guidelines. They're not about specific careers. But they have to do with a couple of different principles. One is the principle of ahimsa, that we want to do something that at worst is neutral with respect to contributing something to others, and at best is contributing something positive, but isn't doing harm as much as we can avoid it. We also want to do something that supports our spiritual practice. It takes a lot of energy, and it takes some time, and it might even take some money, as the Dalai Lama said, to actually be able to do spiritual practice. He was asked by some interviewer, what is the most important thing people need to do practice? And he said, money. Right? Because you have to have a roof over your head, you have to have some free time, you have to be able to get teachings, and perhaps even, if you're a student of the Dalai Lama, you have to travel to get teachings. You could try hanging out in a loincloth, but that doesn't really fly here. I think what the Dalai Lama was speaking to was our situation. He wasn't speaking to maybe what you needed in ancient times, although I'm sure you still needed at least a couple of rupees to rub together. It definitely makes it easier to do practice if you're not overly worried about money. Right? Before we actually need money, we need energy. We need energy to do our practice. We need to be able to get up in the morning feeling rested and energized and like not depleted, or not so depleted that we don't have the energy to do practice. When we think of what is right livelihood, number one thing for me is work that doesn't leave you too exhausted to do your practice. And ideally, work that is nourishing. So I'm going to sort of give the negative and the more positive version of the same thing. work that doesn't leave us too exhausted to do our practice. There's plenty of ways that work can be exhausting. One is that it's just a toxic environment. Two is that we're putting in too many hours at work. Working a 35-hour or 40-hour week is a lot of hours for a human being. When I first started my work life back in the day, you got an hour or 45 minutes off for lunch. And now people only get a half an hour off for lunch. That is not a healthy situation. You don't even have time to eat, let alone begin digesting something before you have to go back to your job. One of the principles of putting your life in line with something like right livelihood is practical positivity. That's one of our precepts, right? That we act with a sense of practical positivity. In other words, when we come up against what seems to be an obstacle or a conceptual barrier, our attitude isn't, oh, that won't work. Our attitude is, how can I work with this? So we are always trying to work with circumstance. In the matter of it being in a work environment where you're not being overly exhausted or you're not working too many hours, you might think to yourself, and many people do think to themselves, well, I just have to keep this job, or there's nothing I can do about this. We often feel very trapped in our jobs, and what we're really trapped by is our fear of not having enough money. So if you feel that way, that you're trapped in a job that is taking too many hours and sucking your energy, try to approach it with practical positivity, meaning that you're actually going to look around beyond the barrier wall of your concepts about what's possible and what's not possible. And you're going to have an exploratory approach rather than a predetermined stale approach, which is, it's never going to work, I can't leave, there's nothing I can do about it. You're going to actually jump over that wall and start just asking questions. What can I do? Is there something else? What are the situations that I might not have thought of? So we sort of want to go out into an open feeling about these kinds of things when our immediate response is, no, that won't work. Most things are workable. On some level, most things are workable. Doesn't mean that we always get the ideal, but even an extremely limited situation is workable. So for instance, you're in a job that's too many hours. Maybe you could shave 5 hours a week off your job and still be able to pay your bills. Maybe you could go to your boss and say, could I work 5 hours less a week? Maybe they might say no, maybe they might say yes. So that's just a very, very small example. But you have to use your creativity. You have to sort of see your immediate responses as karmic responses and try to get beyond them so that you can exercise a more exploratory, open approach. Then we also need our bodies to not be depleting us as much as possible. It's not possible to avoid illness. It's not possible to avoid getting tired sometimes. But as much as possible, we try to take care of our bodies so that they can be good vehicles for us to do spiritual practice, right? And the same thing goes for our work. So the work that we do should not be harmful to our bodies as much as is possible. And in fact, it would be great to be in a job that was actually good for our bodies in some way, or at least neutral with respect to what is happening with our bodies. We also should avoid work that the only purpose of that job is to make money. This is really a depressing situation. It depresses our energy, and it is ultimately depleting when there is no value to our work other than a monetary value. So if you find yourself going to work and your feeling about it is, I'm only putting in my 8 hours or my 7 hours to get my paycheck and there's nothing else in it for me, that is hugely depleting. And if you are working in a situation where for the company that you're working for or the bosses that you're working for, their only reason for doing it is to make money, that is also hugely depleting. The corollary to that is you want to be expressing your values, but you also have to be working for people who are expressing some kind of value. Simply selling something for the sake of making money, and there's nothing else to it, is ultimately depleting. When there's no other added value to it. You have to have a sense that you're contributing something, or that your company is contributing something. There has to be that feeling in order for your basic energy to be supported. We call that ojas in Ayurveda. So in order to support your basic immunity, your basic sense of having a cushion in life and being able to deal with what comes along, to have a little extra juice, you need to be in a situation where there's more value other than just a monetary value. You also don't want to be working in a situation that is actively harming people or animals or anybody, either your company or you personally. And let me just say that there is no pure situation where we're never harming anyone. Because when we put money in a bank, we're harming people. We're harming our planet. Right? I mean, there's no way to avoid in the situation that we're living in. There's no way to live in a total condition of non-violence or non-harm. But if we are working for a company that's actively polluting the environment, or actively throwing people out on the street, or some such thing, that is also very harmful to our energy and makes it difficult to be a practitioner, and ultimately is very depleting and exhausting. So you want to work for a company that is not actively harming other beings, and that's just the bare minimum requirement, because the most nourishing thing for you as a practitioner and as a human being is to be working either for yourself or for a company or organization that's actively contributing something positive that is in alignment with your values. I was talking to Matri. She's doing a kind of work now that I used to do, which is raising money for nonprofit organizations. And sometimes the work is very boring. Writing grant proposals is not really, the most exciting thing sometimes. But I was telling her, she'd been in a little period where the work had gotten a bit boring. And I said, that happened to me. I just reminded myself of the fact that the money I was helping to raise was actually going to make significant concrete improvements in people's lives. And that was nourishing, even if writing the grant itself was it's not like every moment of your work has to be exciting, but you have to feel like you're making a positive contribution. This is really important, and it's so all-encompassing. And there's sort of two parts to this. So you don't want to be involved in work that requires you to actively lie or actively manipulate other people. I went to buy a used car some weeks ago, and the person was lying to me. I mean, not in a heinous way, just in the way that salespeople sometimes do. And in the middle of this, he had told me a lie, which I knew was a lie. I mean, I didn't say anything about it, but I knew it was a lie. And his coworker said something just coincidentally that revealed that he had lied. And this guy had an asthma attack right in front of me. So I really considered writing him a note afterwards saying, if you stopped lying, you would stop getting asthma attacks. I felt sorry for the guy, He obviously wanted to not lie, but his body was saying, I don't want to lie. I don't want to lie. Right? I'm not giving you my breath anymore to put out more lies. In some way, he was a very sweet person, but he just somehow gotten into this bad situation, right? Where he was forced, or he felt he was forced to lie and manipulate people. So the corollary to that is something that's along the same continuum as lying and manipulating, but it's much more common, which is you don't want to be involved in work that requires you to act out or persona or act in a contrived way. In our everyday lives, if we are constantly projecting or acting out some kind of persona out of fear or whatever, vanity or whatever, vanity's fear too, but or constantly acting in a contrived way, it's exhausting. People who act in a very contrived way all the time, you know how they are? they do it publicly, and then they're constantly having to run back to their cave to regroup and recapture their energy. Often people who act in a very contrived way, they kind of crash because they use up so much energy. Every time they go into public, they use up this inordinate amount of energy. And then they have to go be alone for long periods of time and not to relate to anybody because they're so exhausted, and then they have to recapture that energy. Well, if you're not only doing that in your personal life, but you're doing it at work too, because that's the only way you can be approved of at work and get by and get promotions and all that kind of stuff, you are basically writing your ticket on the fast train to an early death from exhaustion. There is nothing more exhausting than contrivance. And we all experience a certain level of contrivance in our lives. Everybody does. But there's levels, right? There's more or less exhausting levels of contrivance. And as you go along as a practitioner and you start becoming more aware of the levels of contrivance that you're acting out, you begin to notice more how exhausting they are. The ultimate contrivance is our feeling of separation from other people. A root sense of separation from others. And simply learning how to relax that helps you to recapture a huge amount of energy. That root sense of separation gives rise to all these other kinds of contrivance that we push out, basically pushing our energy into these personas. If you're in a job that either requires you to lie or manipulate, or that just requires you're constantly contriving a personality of some sort, or pushing out too much energy. Let's say you're in some sort of a job like real estate sales or something like that, where you have to be like, hi, like that. I just spilled an incredible amount of energy doing that, right? You do that day in, day out, you become exhausted. And then exhaustion just becomes your state. You're so immersed in exhaustion, you hardly even realize it. You also want to be in work situations that you can actually digest. In other words, you can feel comfortable and relaxed at work, and then you can come home and you're not always doing work in your head at home. So when a situation is too much for you, for whatever reason, we say in this tradition you can't digest it, and then it's sort of living in your body, energy, and mind rent-free. You're always thinking about it and using up your energy around it. There's things in relationships we have trouble digesting. There's circumstances, and there's also being in a job that is digesting us rather than us digesting it. So if you're constantly overwhelmed at work, or always feeling everything is unfinished, or always thinking you're not doing a good job, or someone's, creating that situation for you to feel that, and you're always thinking about it at home, you are being digested by that job. And that is not the right circumstance for you. You need to get out of that circumstance. So you want to be in a job that feels comfortable, where you feel at ease, in order to support the rest of your life and your practice. So a lot of these things that I've been talking about, like work that actively harms people or is harmful to your body, or where you're lying or manipulating or contriving, one way of describing that kind of work is that you are deepening your own karmic patterning, and you are also in concert with others contributing to the situation where other people are deepening their karmic fixation or karmic entanglements. So let's say you're in a job where you're contriving and you're manipulating, and other people are doing it too, and you're all doing it together. I mean, basically you're all reinforcing each other, and that's a karmic knot, right? That's something that you're carrying with you, and that is going to have to be unwound at some point. So you also want to be in a situation where you don't have to contribute, or as much as possible, you're not contributing to other people continuing their karmic entanglements. You can't do anything about what they do, about their fixations, their reactivity, their patterns of body, energy, and mind. But you can be in a situation where you don't have to contribute to what other people are doing, and deepen your own karmic entanglement and theirs also. And then finally, just in a general sense, you don't want to be in a work situation that's out of alignment with your core values, whatever those values might be. And I think we've talked about that a lot before. And I had done a little teaching on my commitments as a teacher, which were expressive of some of my core values. And people got kind of excited about that and thought, well, maybe I'll write out my core commitments, that come out of my values. So it's a really great thing to do when you're considering the question, what should I do in my life? If you understood what really your bottom lines are in terms of what you value and your own self-valuing, then maybe it would be a little easier to choose the right kind of work for you. Because you don't want to be working against yourself in those ways. You don't want to be compromising those things. There are many things we can compromise. There are many negotiations we can make with other people and give way or yield when somebody wants to do something with us that's maybe not what we want to do right then and there, or maybe not what we want to do at all. But if it doesn't conflict with our core values, then it's not going to harm us to do it. But when we go against our own core values, our own commitments to those values, then we are harmed. We are harming ourselves. And ahimsa really starts with non-self-harm. There's no way to practice non-harming for others if you're harming yourself. And the very most core place we can start is with those things that we hold most dear in life, what we value most. So at a minimum, the work that we do should not contravene or undermine those core values. And at best, it should support them and be expressive of them. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.